Welcome everyone, my name's David from FintechOS, and in this video we're going to see why data modeling is such an important concept behind almost every software application. And then I'm going to show you how you can build your own data model inside the FintechOS Studio. Alright, so we're basically going to talk about the importance of data modeling in a software project, the main components of a data model, and last but not least, building a data model in the FintechOS Studio. So we'll start with a simple case study, right? Let's say that we're a company and we want to build an app through which we can manage information about our clients and their contracts. Now, this will help us understand how we can build with data at the core using FintechOS technology. Now, in pretty much every IT software project, we start with the need, right? And the need is either a problem or an opportunity that needs to be addressed. Now, in our case, we just want to be able to manage our clients and their contracts. But then we get to the requirement. And according to the International Institute of Business Analysis, the requirement is a usable representation of the need. So in our case, we want to add a client and their contract, right? We also want to modify them, delete them, and eventually visualize them. After the requirement comes the design, which is of course the visual representation of the solution, and then eventually the actual solution, right? The output of the implementation. But let's talk more about the design for a second. The main components of application design are business flow, the mockups, the architecture, and the data model. Now, if we're talking about functional and non-functional requirements, we're going to have a lot more components for the design, right? But for now, we will only focus on the business flow, the mockups, and of course, the data model. So how will the flow look in our case? Well, first of all, we want to collect the main info about the client. Then the second step is some additional info. And then, of course, we want some information about their contracts. Now, what will the actual interface look for this flow? We get to the mockups. This is how we will collect the main info about the client. Then we'll go to the second step, which will collect the additional info. And as you can see, the contracts table is empty, but we can add a new contract. So simple as that, some basic information about the contract. And there we go. And the question is, where does all this information go? The answer is, it goes inside a database. And according to Wikipedia, this is the definition, right? Organized collection of data stored and accessed from a computer system. But now the second question is, how do we store and organize this collection of data? And of course, the answer is through data modeling. And according to Wikipedia, you can already see the definition. What it's important to know is that the output of data modeling is, of course, the data model. And the last question has to be, what are the main components of a data model? First of all, we have the attributes, which are the actual pieces of information that go inside the database. Now, in our case, here we have the main client's info form. From here, we gather the following attributes, and then all of these go into the database. But here we have a problem. We can't just place all of these attributes just like that in the database, right? We need to store them in a structural way. So we group them into what we call the entities. And these are, the actual tables in which the attributes are structured inside the database. Now, there's an entire theory about the process of normalization on how to organize the entities to reduce redundancy and dependency of the data, but we're not going to go into more detail regarding that. In our case, the entities will look like this. So we have the clients and the contracts along with their attributes. So the actual information that we collect and place in the database. However, here we have two more attributes that we haven't talked about: the client's ID and the contract's ID. These are generated automatically by the database management system in order to give each entity a unique character. And these are what we call the primary keys. Now, we have the two entities along with their attributes, but there's one more thing missing from this data model. And that is a relationship. We have to create an association between these two entities. So if we go back, this is what we call a one-to-many relationship. Meaning that if you think about it, one client can have one or more contracts, but a contract can only be related to one single client. So this means that the client is the parent entity and the contract is the child entity. So in order to create this relationship, the primary key from the clients will become what we call foreign key inside the contract. And this will basically create the one-to-many relationship. So in our case, this is how the situation will look like. We have one client and we have one contract that is related to this client. But in time, this client will be able to have more that are related to him because of the nature of this relationship. But now let's go ahead and build this data model with these entities and these attributes. All right. We made it. This is the fun part because we're now building this data model we've been talking so much about, right? So we're in the FintechOS Studio. This is sort of the back end, right? Where we design stuff. Later on, I'm going to show you the front end as well, which is called the Digital Experience Portal. Okay, remember that. Now, let's go ahead and build our entities. So to do that, we'll go on the sidebar, go to Evolutive Data Model and Data Model Explorer. Now, these are all the entities that we have in the platform. Some of them are system entities, which are added by default. Some of them are custom entities. We're just going to add 2 more custom entities. So to do that, we'll go to Insert and we'll start with the clients entity. So we'll first of all give it a name. Now, this isn't just any ordinary name. This will appear in the studio, right? So in the back end, not in the front end. None of your clients will see it, right? So you can include a code name if you want for your entity, and it needs to be unique, right? You cannot have 2 identical entities. Now, in this case, we're simply going to name it client. Then the display name is the name that will appear in the portal, okay? So your clients will see it. So if you have named it here with a code name, here you probably need to give it a name that your clients will understand as well. And very important, this is localizable, right? So it can be translated in any language you want. Then the display collection name. Also for the portal, if you want to visualize the records from an entity in a more structured way, you can give the entire collection a different name, right? So in this case, we can name it client lists. Then the description. Now this may seem pretty straightforward, but think about it. If you have a lot of entities, and I mean a lot of them, if you have no description attached to them, it can be very easy to lose track of what a certain entity does. Okay, so description is very important. So here we can write a list of all the clients in the X company. Okay, very important. Then the table name. Now this is very important because this is the name of the entity in the database. Okay, so not in the studio. And it can be identical to the studio name, but for example, if you already have a naming convention in place in your database, you may want to keep that going, right? So you can rename this to fit your naming convention, whatever that is. Then the primary attribute name. Also very important. This is the first attribute that you add in this entity, and it needs to have a unique character. Now, keep in mind that is different from the primary key, right? The primary key is a technical attribute that is generated automatically by the system, right? This can be seen probably from a business perspective, right? So in the case of the clients, this might be the social security number. The primary attribute display name, you know the drill, this shows up in the portal, so your customers will see it, so we may want to include the full name, right? Social security number, very straightforward. Primary attribute table column, similar to the table name, it will be the name of the attribute, which is the column inside the database. So again, if you wanted to fit your naming convention, again, whatever that is, you can write it in there, no problem. Default entity status, also pretty important. Now, this works probably like a label, right? So it has no technical implication, but this is only for your own peace of mind to know if this entity is included in something more advanced, right? Like a digital journey. So this isn't, right? We're gonna click on draft, okay, and there we go. Then the is audited option, also very important. This option will create a separate table that will keep track of all the modifications that have been done to this entity, okay? Who did the modifications, when, what kind of modifications were they? And you know, this comes in handy in the case of a real audit, right? So, you know, if you store sensitive information in there, you might want to select this option as well. However, keep in mind that this also takes up storage space inside the database, so you will be charged for it. So if it is really important, you might as well do it. But if not, you know, it is a separate table at the end of the day, right? So in this case, we're not going to select it. Then business workflow. Now, this is a bit more advanced for now, so we'll probably discuss it in a separate video. And then last but not least, the optimization search data. And this will help you increase the database performance, because if this is, let's say, not selected, then whenever you do a partial search in the database, it will return all of those results that contain what you have searched for, okay? Just contain wherever in the word. But if you select it, then it will return all of those results that start with the thing that you have searched, okay? Now, basically, we have created the entity. We can go ahead, save and reload. Also very important. Now we'll scroll down here to the data model, and we're going to start adding our attributes. We're going to see that the first attribute, the social security number, is already added, and the primary key as well, the client's ID, right, which I told you that was generated automatically. Now let's insert our probably second attribute, right, which will be the first name in our case, right? We want to know the client's first name. Now, the name, also very similar to the entity name, it will be used in the studio. First name. Now, the attribute type. This is a very important part. We have a lot of attribute types, so here you can select what type of attribute you want to create. There are many of them. We're probably going to cover this in a separate video as well, because this is really cool. So we're going to select text for now. Display name, again, you know the drill. First name. Description, again, you know the drill. This is the first name, let's say family, of the client. Now, the tooltip, on the other hand, is sort of a description that will show up in the portal for the client, right? The description is internally, is in the studio, is for yourself. The tooltip, you know, fill in this field with your family name, so oriented towards the client. Table column name, again, hashtag naming convention. Now, the length in this case, you know, if you don't want to offend anyone that has a very long name, you might type in 100, right? Then is localizable, means that it can be translatable, so why not? Required level. Now, this is, let's say, like in the case of a questionnaire, right? Some answers are more important than others, right? The first name is obviously pretty important. Now, the required makes it mandatory, and we will also display a small little red dot next to it in the portal. The recommended will not make it mandatory, but it will display a blue dot next to it. And then none, well, none doesn't do anything really, but we're going to click on required in this case. And then is read only means that once this attribute is created, all the records that go into it will be unchangeable, okay? So nobody can change them. Now, in this case, we shouldn't click read only because a client can change his name, but the date of birth, for example, that is definitely unchangeable, right? So in that case, you can select the is read only option. In this case, we're gonna leave it like that. And now I'm gonna go on and add the other attributes as well. All right, so we've added all the attributes in the client's entities. So we'll go to data model, and we've added, you know, first name, last name, date of birth, address, and then the phone number, right? Now, let's go ahead and add one more entity. Save that one, insert another one, and this will be the contract. Now let's fast forward a bit. There we go, that was fast. Now I'm going to go ahead and add some attributes. Attributes have been created, that was fast as well. And we have the following. We have the contract number, which is the primary attribute, contracts ID, primary key generated automatically, all that stuff. And then I've added the start date, end date, and the amount. Then we have the following, which are added by default in any entity. Now, if you remember the is audited situation, it has created a second table, but these are created anyway, and they record, when this entity has been created, right? When it has been modified and by whom, okay? But it doesn't give you any extra details. But it's good to know that you have these details anyway. Now, we have the two entities. They have their own attributes. But now, what do we do with them? We can't just leave them like this. We're going to create a relationship. And think about it. What kind of relationship will that be? A client can have one or more contracts, right? While a contract can only be linked to one single client. So we'll call this a one-to-many relationship. But how do we do it? How do we create this relationship? Well, we'll call the client the parent entity, right? And the contract the child entity. And inside the child entity, which is the contract, we're going to create a special attribute. From the data model, we'll insert a new attribute, and this attribute will create the relationship. And in here, in the name, we're going to type in the primary key from the clients, right? This is what it's recommended, right? To give it the exact name. So we're going to type in client's ID, and this will become the foreign key inside the contract's entity. So attribute type, very important. In this case, we'll go to this drop down and we're going to look for lookup, right? Remember this attribute name, lookup. This creates the relationship, okay? Then the display name, it doesn't matter, right? It's the primary key. So we'll do that here. Description, PK for clients, FK for contracts, right? Primary key for clients, foreign key for contracts. But the lookup to entity, this is what we're looking for. So we're going to click on this drop down and we have to select the parent entity, which is the client, right? We're looking for this one. Click OK, and then the lookup relationship name is generated, which first of all, we have the child entity name, contract, then the client's ID, which is on the one hand, the primary key for the clients and the foreign key for the contracts, and then clients, which is the parent entity. Clients is the parent entity. Okay, now, how can we visualize this relationship? Well, first of all, we'll save and close, right? This relationship is officially created. And inside an entity, we're in the contracts entity now. If we scroll down, we get to this section here, relationships reference. This section here, reference, shows all the relationships in which the contracts is the child entity, right? So we have these ones right here and the relationship that we have just created, the clients, the relationship to the clients, right? If we collapse this and we open the referencing, this will show up all the relationships where this entity is a parent, okay? In this case, we don't have any, but if we go to the clients, there we go, we're editing the clients, we'll scroll down, relationships referenced, we have a couple of them where this entity is a child, and relationships referencing, where this one is a parent, there is our relationship. Now, this is one way of visualizing your relationship. And let me show you another very cool way to visualize this relationship. We'll go on the sidebar and we'll go to Data Model Designer. So here we are, Data Model Designer, and here are our two entities, the clients along with their attributes and the contracts along with their attributes and the relationship between them. So it's a very cool way to visualize your relationship, right? And you can extend your data model, right? That's what FintechOS is all about. So from the left-hand side here we have all the existing entities from the platform, right? And if we want to add an existing entity to this data model to create a many-to-many relationship, right, as opposed to ours, which is one-to-many, we can search for, let's say, product, right? So we'll add this in there, and to create a relationship between the clients and the products, all we have to do is select this end here, this corner, and drag it towards the clients. This will open up this box, right, where we can add our relationship, and we can call it, products, clients, relationship. Let's say MM, because it's many to many. We'll copy this to the display name. Here you have a couple of more details. Very important is this one, relationship constraint, right? If you remove a record from an entity that is related to another entity, you can choose what implications this might have to the records from the related entity. So if you select none, there will be no implications. If you select restrict, it will not allow you to remove one record from two related entities. And if you select cascade, then all of the related records will also be deleted. And there we go. Look how the product is now connected to the clients through this additional table that was created through this many-to-many relationship. And it's a really cool way to visualize your data model. You can drag it around, you can do all sort of stuff. But now let me show you a bigger data model. To do that, we'll simply go to Load Business Data Model, and we'll select this one, Lead Management ERD. Look at this. This was basically collected from one of our apps, which is available in the App Store for free. So if you are not a member of our community to have access to the App Store, check out a video that we did on the community. Maybe you'll snuck in there as well and check out how cool it is. But now look at this. Look at how advanced this data model is with all of these connections, right? All of these entities along with their attributes and the relationships, and you can move them around however you want. So look how cool things you can build with the FintechOS. You can build them inside the Data Model Explorer, as I've shown you in the beginning, right? Creating the entities, the attributes, all that stuff, and then visualizing them. Amazing. And last but not least, I want to show you guys, I want to give you a sneak peek of what you'll see in the next video. This is the FintechOS portal. Right now we're looking at a view of the clients and the contracts. And this is how you can add the main information about the client. As you can see, the address attribute is actually a map. So you can actually select the address on an actual map, then the additional information with the calendar, information about the contracts. And of course, you can also modify a certain record that you've added before. But of course, this is just a sneak peek. In the next video, we'll see how we can build all of this inside the FintechOS Studio. And that's about it for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it and that you got a lot out of it. And we're waiting for you to discover all the amazing functionalities from the FintechOS Studio. Now, if you have any questions or suggestions, let us know by leaving a comment below, and let's have a chat about that. And I'll see you guys in the next video where we're going to put this data model to good use. So until then, take care, and I'll see you in the next video.